Welcome and thank you for joining me here at Film Pro Productivity. Each week I introduce concepts that film professionals and other creatives can use to make life easier and avoid creative burnout. I also present time management and lifestyle hacks for a more focused, effective and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson and this is episode 28. You have the power. This show is the last of season 2 and today I will be encouraging you to yet again take control of your life and work and dreams and ambitions by adopting the productivity techniques that I have talked about here on this podcast. Call it a motivational talk if you will, but by recapping on some of the key techniques that I have introduced here, I will show you how you can gain back control of your life and take positive action to move forward. As usual, I will do a recap on last week's episode before moving on to the main subject, and that show simply recommended 5 more awesome and mostly free apps which are useful for improving your productivity. One thing that I've noticed since releasing it is that Apple no longer have the call recorder app that I recommended in their store, but I have linked in last week's show notes to several similar apps in order to cover this. Now, if you missed the episode, then please go back and check it out, as there are genuinely some awesome apps in there that will make your life a hell of a lot easier. I've wasted too much time on apps that are supposedly good for productivity but have turned out to be not much use in the long run. So what I can guarantee is if you adopt and utilise any of my suggestions, and it's worth noting that they are largely free, as I say, to download and use, that you will thank me later. And can I just add that if you would like to recommend your own favourite apps for productivity for inclusion in a future episode, then please get in touch, as I'd really appreciate your input on this topic. Kenneth Branagh's definition of success, he says, is control. And that doesn't mean that he's a control freak. It just means that he wants to be driving the bus in his career, in his personal life, and whatever he does. I believe that if you don't actively take control by assuming that higher level of thinking that I talked about in episode 1, that the chances of you getting where you want to go in life, or in your career, or in whatever your endeavour, will be near zero. Getting yourself to a place where you are in control is the basis for this episode. It's all too easy, you see, to get yourself into a state of mind where you feel trapped, where you feel like you're missing out on your dreams or your goals, and ultimately in your happiness, because of perhaps a decision or a series of decisions that you have made along the way. Those decisions, oftentimes made out of necessity, which were the correct things to do at the time, might ultimately leave you with a feeling of dissatisfaction or indeed downright unhappiness with where you are now in your life and in your career. You may even feel that although you are successful and happy in one area of your life and work, that you have lost control or direction in another. Now, I've called today's show You Have the Power, but I was very close to calling it Save Yourself. You see, buried under the weight of the day-to-day distractions, commitments, fears and anxieties that you find yourself sometimes lost or trapped within, it really is you and only you that has the power to get yourself out of trouble and back on track. My feeling is that unless you actively work to defeat these distractions and negative emotions, that they will drag you down. They smother your hopes and dreams and cling to your time and your mental energy like barnacles. You have to take the hammer and chisel that the productivity techniques I talk about here offer you and chip them away, these problems, one at a time. Once you start to do that, you will soon get back control and give yourself the ability to steer things in a direction of your own choosing. Motivational writer and philosopher Stephen Redhead says that you must start living by taking back the control of your life now. Create a life more in tune with your true desires. Now, there's a few parts of that statement that I want to reiterate. The start living part is essential. When you start to consider the larger picture, everything that follows will be driven by what you learn from it. And that can only happen if it goes hand in hand with the second essential part. Creating a life which is in tune with your desires, and I would add, your values. If you are unhappy, stressed, frustrated, or simply lost, then you may feel that the life and career you'd hoped for is slipping away, or is already so far out of reach that you've given up. You must remember, though, that stress and worry over your problems depletes your mental energy reserves, solves nothing, and actually blocks you from thinking of solutions. In the very first episode of the podcast, I said that you should begin to work on your life and career at the same time that you find yourself living and working in it. And to do this, you need to develop that higher level of thinking I mentioned a minute ago. I absolutely believe that we all have the power to take control, to a degree at least, over our lives, but that it is only possible if we engage our minds in strategizing how to do it. Author of Alphabet Success, Tim Fargo, said that who you are tomorrow begins with what you do today, and that if you want to get ahead, you must slow down and focus. Fargo's advice to slow down and focus is the key to getting back control. Look back to my episode on killing the microwave mindset for more advice on slowing down, by the way. With well thought out, focused strategies, we can create long-term plans to achieve what we seek in life. And let me follow that up with a quote from author Steve Maraboli. He says that incredible change happens in your life when you decide to take control of what you have the power over, instead of craving control over what you don't. Now, productivity encapsulates a large degree of positivity, but sometimes I have to offer advice that is more of a reality slap than a positive affirmation of what you would like to hear. The reality slap that I ask you to accept is that there is such a thing as supply and demand. Everyone, right off the bat, can't be the director, or the cinematographer, or the screenwriter, the designer, the lead actor or actress, as these are limited positions. Some roles have tons of demand, while others have very limited demand. And I don't mean that you shouldn't aspire to a certain role. Just don't be shocked if the job isn't there for you when you go looking for it, and don't be shocked if you have to be a camera assistant for a few years before the first opportunity comes along for you to be the DP. Remember that nobody owes you anything. Just because you want a position doesn't mean someone is required to give you a job. You must demonstrate that you can create value for people, otherwise they'll find another person to get the same things done. Creating value, by the way, means learning things other people don't know. It means doing things other people aren't willing to do. It sometimes means working for free to demonstrate you're capable of performing. It means taking on tasks no one else wants and turning them into something better. It means working harder than everyone else. It means demonstrating you're worth keeping around and worth paying for. And I want to just hammer this one home a bit further with a quote from Gary Vaynerchuk. He says, "A penguin cannot become a giraffe, so just be the best penguin that you can be." And I've got another quote here by Charles T. Munger, which also clarifies my position on this. He said, "To get what you want, you have to deserve what you want. The world is not yet a crazy enough place to reward a whole bunch of undeserving people." And I wanted to make this point as there's a fine line between confidence and delusion, and it's important that you recognise this. If you're getting hot and bothered about getting nowhere fast in your life and career, then persistence and patience may be the useful allies on your journey. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you've probably already got the productivity techniques at hand to help you clear the space in your life, your work, your time and your energy to take a breather for a wee while, make a plan and get yourself moving again, this time in a direction of your own choosing. I've just spent 6 weeks, amongst other things, it's fair to say, writing, producing and hosting this podcast for which I receive no payment whatsoever, but I've chosen to do this, and with that choice comes satisfaction. By assuming a position of high-level thinking, I realised that at certain points in the year I can now afford to work on my own creative projects, this being one of them. And I accept that I don't have full control over my year, that I can work on other cool and interesting projects with cool and interesting creative people during the larger part of the year to earn money and pay bills, but in the quieter parts of the year I have a tremendous opportunity to advance my own creative endeavours when my workload is quiet. And I'm not sitting on a pile of cash here, but to a large degree at least, I am in control of my own life and work. And to me, sitting here and doing this feels like success. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to this question, but I'd like you to ask yourself, What does success mean to you? It's something you simply have to consider if you genuinely want to take control of your life and move forward. What exactly are you trying to achieve? I can't help thinking of Simon Sinek's book Find Your Why when I talk about this, so perhaps you should also ask yourself why you want what you want. If you know what you're trying to achieve and why you want to achieve it, then you will be able to determine what success will mean to you. Making these decisions will mean that you can focus on what really matters. Peter Drucker says nothing is less productive than to make more efficient that which should not be done in the first place. And what we are getting down to here is what I talked about in episode 3, that is to give yourself the best possible chance of success, you need to prioritise what is important over what is not. Considering, as I said before, what you can control and what you can't, will also save you a lot of wasted time and effort. Now, I could follow this point up by going into any number of the points that I make in individual episodes, but really, that's what the full podcast episodes are for. What I would say, though, is that a contender for chief amongst the lessons is that you must really look out for toxic people who will get their claws into your time and energy and ensure that your own dreams always come second. Listen to episode 24 for advice on that one. Or listen to episode 18 for advice on protecting your mental energy, as that's way up there in importance too. But I'm not going into them just right now. I'm going to go right back to episode 2 instead to give you the final piece of advice on gaining control of your life. You just have to learn to say no. Zig Ziglar says the first step to getting what you want is to have the courage to get rid of what you don't. I've actually written a note in my board for season 3 to do an episode on people-pleasing, which is a big problem for some of us, and it's likely that it could be a huge problem for you if you have trouble saying no to people. But here's the thing though, unless you can find the strength within you to start saying no to things that do not further your own dreams or goals in some way, then you will be forever putting your own dreams and goals second or third or 10th in line to someone else's, and you will never gain control back over your life or your work or your creative endeavours. Go right back to episode 2 and have a listen. It's one of my earlier ones, so do forgive me if it's a little bit less polished, but check it out and take note, as you absolutely must learn to say no. You must get over this built-in need to people-please, as the cost is simply too high. And stop worrying about upsetting people. If they do get upset because you say no, you should ask yourself, is this someone that I even want in my life anyway? And your life won't fall apart because you've prioritised your things over theirs. And the other thing is, stop feeling guilty. Why is saying no to someone causing you this guilt? Ask yourself that. Saying no to someone isn't a moral issue. Saying no to someone isn't doing anything wrong, so why feel guilty about it? The fact is that saying no is doing something right for you, and in the long run, saving you stress through overwhelm and overcommitment. Stella Adler had a quote for actors which I think I can hijack for general use at this point. She said, "You need a kind of aggression, a kind of inner force. Don't be only one-sided, sweet, nice and good. Get rid of being average. Find the killer in you." Maybe you need a bit of that killer instinct too. James Doohan, who played Scotty in Star Trek, served as a captain in the Canadian Forces and led men into battle on D-Day. And he said in later life that he didn't want control, he just wanted to be told what to do. He said he'd spent his military years ordering people about, and when that career ended, he just wanted to be the best actor that he could be. And at a glance, that may seem that he didn't want control, but he made his decisions along the way, became the best actor he could be, and he was happy. Remember that to be in control, you don't have to be the boss. You can influence, direct, and control your own environment. You can make your life what you want it to be. As this is the last episode of the series, there likely won't be any more than the odd in-between episode for about 3 months, so I think that's plenty of time for me to give you a major call to action on this one. Now, if you want to gain control over your life or your career or your training or creative projects or free time or whatever you set your mind to, then take the steps that I've discussed in this episode and that I'm going to list here for you now to do so. Remember too to write it all down, as when you take that action, it greatly increases the odds of you succeeding in your endeavour. If I've said it once, I've said it 20 times on this podcast, but if you write something down, you are 80% more likely to do it. It just makes these things become real in your mind, and it's well worth doing. Don't just passively listen to this podcast and then listen to the next one. Stop, think, write stuff down, take action. I'll just reiterate the steps that I discussed in this episode. It was a slightly different format, so I'll go through them one more time here. Number 1, decide what success means to you. Decide what you're trying to achieve. Number 2, say no to anything that doesn't further your dreams, goals, and ambitions. This will find you time you thought you never had, by the way. It really is essential. Number 3, prioritise what is important over what is not. Prioritising is vital. And number 4, make a plan. Make a plan, write it down as I say, and stick to it. Number 5, slow down. You'll have bought yourself time by saying no to things, by prioritising. Suddenly you're going to find that you have time on your hands you've never had before. You don't need to run around crazy. Slow down and play the long game. And 6, I made the point earlier, I had to kind of force it into this episode, to be honest, but I felt it was important to do so. Number 6 is be confident, but not delusional. If you follow these steps, you will gain control. Slowly but surely over your life. Take control and make your life happy. That's your call to action. Internationally renowned psychologist Irene Casorla said, "The pen that writes your life story must be held in your own hand. So if you feel trapped, restricted, or cornered in some way, don't worry. This too shall pass. Take the steps I suggest to gain back control. You're going to be okay. Everything is going to be all right." And that marks the end of the, shall we call it, the lesson part of this episode. Now, as some of you probably know, I batch recorded this season in January and February of this year, but I'm jumping in now in May with an update or two just before this episode is launched. Firstly, it is to thank you for listening. The download numbers have more than doubled, and it's largely down to word of mouth. Without your help, Film Pro Productivity would frankly just be another podcast that slowly slips away. Every new listener, you can get to subscribe by reposting my links or talking about it online. Every review you take the time to write, especially on iTunes, which really, really helps, by the way. If you've not done it so far, then please do so. That presence there on iTunes, these continuing reviews that are coming in really do help me to get new listeners coming in from that platform. Every new person that decides to listen to the show after you've recommended it to them makes this show stronger, and I really am eternally grateful for it. I also wanted to jump back in and say that I'm considering running a crowdfunder to pay for year two's hosting costs, etc. So please look out for it. I'd be raising the minimum you can go for on Indiegogo, as these costs aren't that high, just a few $100s, but I would appreciate your help with retweets and just spreading the word about it if and when that comes up. I may not do it. I might do it. I might not. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Next, though, I also want to jump in because I'm going to be making some changes, and Season 3 will likely take a slightly different format. It's either going to be one of 6 interview shows with productivity authors being the guests, and 6 kind of as normal shows like the ones you've heard before. Alternatively, it'll be a 24-show season of what I'm calling in my mind 5-minute motivation episodes. And knowing me, it's going to be more like 5 or 10 minutes, but we shall see. Basically, shorter, faster, on-point shows, released 2 per week for 12 weeks. And at the moment, I'm favouring that option. Season 3 will come around in approximately 3 months, and if you're very lucky, you will get a bonus in between episode or 2 in the break as well. I've got more plans afoot for the show, including taking a 30-day social networking fast in June as research for an episode, and I've no idea how I'll get it together as I need to go and earn a living instead of spending time on a podcast I give away for free. But at some point, I'll also start releasing the shows on YouTube. I could have done this right from the start, but was advised against it. But now that I've been doing it for a year, I have a sense that it might actually be worthwhile. And I think that's about all I've got to say for now. Thanks again for taking the time to join me this season. I hope that it's been beneficial and enjoyable to you. And as I'll be off for an off-season break for the next few months, I'll take this opportunity to recommend a few filmmaking podcasts which you can listen to in the interim. First and foremost, and it'll be no surprise to regular listeners, but please check out my friend Ian O'Neill's show, How They Did It Filmmaking, which is one of the few shows that I've actually never missed an episode of. Also, the Stephen Rowan Show, as Stephen Rowan has been interviewing quite a lot of filmmakers along the way recently. Stephen has a connection to this show as he produced and helped me to structure the first 2 episodes of Film Pro Productivity, and he's just a really awesome guy. Next up, try Alex Ferrari's Most Awesome. I'm saying awesome a lot. That's thanks to my friend Thomas in Hong Kong. He has inflicted me with that word, so now everything is Hong Kong awesome. Thank you very much, Thomas. Anyway, next try Alex Ferrari's Awesome Indie Film Hustle, and you can also get subscribing to the Filmmakers Podcast. Shout out to show host Giles Alderson, as he's a great supporter of this show as well. And one from some local Glasgow lads, which is pretty awesome too, is the Real Filthy Podcast. That's REEL, by the way. I'll obviously put links to these in the show notes. And there's also Indie Film Grit, which I must listen to more of, to be honest. I've listened to a few of them. Seems to be good stuff. I'll keep on listening. You could try it too. And finally, the very first podcast I ever listened to, the brilliant Dave Bullis Podcast, and I've been looking for an opportunity to plug it all season, and it's a great show. Do check that one out. In the interim, you can also follow the show on Facebook at Film Pro Productivity or on Twitter at Film Pro ProdPod if you'd like to stay up to date with what's going on. I will generally put updates out on the website as well, but you're probably more likely to get them on Twitter first. I also have personal accounts on Instagram and Twitter at fight_director. Now, take control of your own destiny. Keep on shooting. And join me next season on Film Pro Productivity. The music that you are listening to right now is Adventures by Ehumitsu. You can view the show notes for this episode at filmproproductivity.com. Get in touch via the contact page on the website if you would like to suggest new topics for the show, and I encourage you to use the SpeakPipe voicemail service there, as I love to hear who is listening. Please support this podcast by subscribing, leaving an awesome review, preferably on iTunes, where it really seems to matter in podcast terms, and by spreading the word and getting folk to listen. That is why I do this after all. See you next time. Bizarrely, I had a request for another one of these. There is an outtake hidden in a previous episode. I'm not going to tell you where it is, but around about this time, in some previous episode, you will find another outtake. Here's one from today. Enjoy it, and as I said before, I'll see you next season. All of these shows are obviously for filmmakers, and I realise the audience listening is somewhat broader than that, but if you fancy checking them out, please do. That's all I'm saying. You don't have to. You don't have to. If I recommend someone on Twitter, if I do Friday follow on Twitter, you don't have to follow them. You can follow them if you like. You can decide not to follow them. It's all one to me. I don't care. You are in control of your own destiny. You are in control. This could be the first step of taking control of your life. You can choose not to listen to the podcast that I suggest. You could listen to other podcasts. You can do whatever you want. You are fully in control. You see, I've turned that around. I've made this about you, the listener. Anyway, there's no way I'm going to include this, but I'll keep going. Right,